Good evening. I'm Mike Nichols, CEO of PMOPA. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for our PMOPA Insurance Survey Results webinar, which will be presented by Salil Donde. Salil is a member of PMOPA's relatively new insurance working group, which we created late last year because insurance issues have been of significant concern to a number of PA-46 owners and pilots. Also, in our recent member opinion survey, insurance issues was one of the top topics of concern for our membership. And the membership also said they enjoy hearing from other members and learning from each other. Well, tonight we can bring these two together, showing you the results of the insurance survey. And Salil's going to provide some recommendations for us as well, what we can do to better improve the insurance position for PA-46 owners and operators. So with that introduction, Salil, thank you so much for your great work putting the survey together, doing the data analysis, and looking forward to you sharing the results with the membership. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Hey, guys. Good evening. I would like you to hold your questions to the end because there's a high probability that I'll answer the question that may be front and center of your mind. I'm not going to go into the specifications of our aircraft, but I want to give you a sense of the approach we took. So we created a survey which was 26 questions. Some forced you to answer within a range, some were open-ended answers. The net was that we are very confident in our findings because 83% of you responded off the 633 that actually opened the survey. So that's a pretty high response rate, and so we have very high confidence in the validity of the data. Just to put a point, roughly half and half turbine and piston, 56% turbine, 44% piston. And the number of responses to each question was slightly different, ranging from 499 to 520. So the percentages are based on the number of answers received. And so the number of responses may not match across all categories. One disclaimer here, results are only as accurate as the data that you guys shared. Example, it was a big surprise to me and to the insurance working group that a whopping 29% of our membership is not instrument rated. And so, that's a big deal. Then there were some other data pieces. For example, there's an individual with a hull value of 425,000 paying 87,000 in premium. And so I exercised some judgment on data that looked like this. So I'm thinking this data must be wrong, and I discarded the data. And there was another, for example, a $320,000 hull paying 34,000. And based on the other attributes in the data, that data is actually correct, but an outlier because it was only a one-year relationship with the carrier. So I kind of put my judgment in on the data there a little bit. And one thing to get you all comfortable, data is anonymized. I don't know who is on each line item response. No one knows who you are. So your data is safe here with me and with PMOPA. So a lot to cover. I'm going to run through it. Looked at the age demographics, net of it. We are a bunch of old people. I was going to say guys. I think that's probably true, but the data didn't say it was mostly guys, so I'm not going to say it. But we're primarily older folk, and it's an aging membership. The important takeaway is that the median of the mode is essentially the number that often occurs most often in the data set. So the mode age group is between 66 and 70 years old, and the median of that group is 68 years old. That's a lot. So important to keep that in mind as I go through the rest of the presentation. What do we do? We're generally people with a high disposable income from the upper levels of income strata, business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, etc. And this is important to carriers, by the way. I'll talk a little bit more about it. carriers do care who you are. So for example, if there was I'm going to just make this up, if there was a uh, hamburger server at a McDonald's owning a PA-46, that would raise questions for them. I'm taking an extreme example to make a point. So it is important that when you put in your application, you spell out who you are and what you do. That is one of the underwriting questions there. Class of medical we fly on. Very few of us, only 5% of us fly on basic med. That to me means we're possibly a pretty healthy membership. But remember, we are an aging membership. Keep that in mind. What do we fly? Where do we park? And how do we monitor? These start getting into the underwriting areas as well. Piston versus turboprop. I did not get a chance, have the data, did not get the chance to drill down into if underwriters view turboprop or piston as one more safe over the other. But I do know that a hangared plane is viewed more favorably by the underwriters than one that is not hangared. And flight data monitoring or no flight data monitoring, such as Cloud Ahoy, plays a role. 23% or 113 of us use a flight data monitoring tool such as Cloud Ahoy. And I did some review of published literature, which does point to the fact that individual use of flight data monitoring enhances safety. I'm not talking about fleet statistics or something like that. That's useful for other things. But specifically for you as an individual, if you do use flight data monitoring or not, there's published literature that indicates FDM enhances your risk level, improves your risk level. Here's the surprising part. Looked at the ratings that we hold. A whopping roughly third, 29%, are only private pilots, with the rest of us having other ratings there. And again, a literature review of several sources, including AOPA, overwhelmingly suggests that instrument rating makes one a safer pilot, regardless of the type of flying, including VFR-only flying. So those of you who are not instrument rated, I urge you very strongly to get that rating to improve your safety and improve your risk profile. Another attribute that's important to the carriers is how much do we fly, total hours. So interestingly, there's 13 of us with fewer than 500 hours, and there's about 75 of us with less than 1,000 hours. The majority of us have over 500 hours, but total hours or total experience does not seem, while it does not seem to be an issue, it is not a key factor for the underwriters. What is more important is your time and type. Specifically, are you a PA-46 turbine or a piston, not just total hours. And even more important is time and type over the last 12 months. How much are you flying over the last 12 months, every year? And generally, when I talk to some carriers, they said 50 is the bare minimum they would tolerate. They like to see 100, but that's again that's again their low end of what they would like to see from a PA-46 airframe pilot. Here it comes down to the PA-46 hours that we log. And so only 50% of us, only half of us have over 500 hours. And that would go to explaining why some of our premiums are so high. And so my takeaway is half the membership is inexperienced. If I use 500 hours as a cutoff there, is inexperienced in a PA-46 airframe. And again, I want to point out hours in the airframe and type is what the carriers really care about. How much do we fly, our monthly hours? Again, you can extrapolate that to 12 months. Most of us fly over 75 hours a year. And there is a group of us who need to evaluate our low flying hours. this group here specifically that flies only 1 to 5 hours. And also I would say this group here that flies, 6 to 10 hours. While there are a few that are 10, there are several that are between, 6 and 7. So these two categories together comprise a fair number of people who don't fly a ton. And again, a review of literature indicates a lower accident rate for pilots with higher monthly flying hours. And I mentioned earlier that insurance companies are looking for 100 hours at a minimum on an annual basis. It doesn't mean they're not going to write or underwrite someone with low hours. It just means they view the risk as a higher profile and are likely to charge higher premiums for that. And this was again a pretty surprising statistics to me in terms of how many landings do we do. Again, a review of published literature indicates that takeoffs and landings test all aspects of a pilot's flight proficiency. And if we're doing fewer than 20 landings, for example here, or we're barely doing 20 to 50 landings a year, that should make you question your own personal proficiency. Are you really proficient, or are you just barely meeting the minimum requirements? Again, big distinction, as you guys know, between meeting the minimum requirements of the regs and other things versus personal proficiency. How often do we train? This is a very big risk factor, underwriting factor. How often do we train? The net of it is a lot of us train, but we don't train a lot. Surprising, only a third of us train more than twice a year. That's pretty startling. And the vast majority were infrequent trainers. So that's a little worrisome here. And it makes me, question whether are we training less because we don't think it's important, or because it's not reasonably economically available, or it's not in proximal geographies. I don't really know the answer, but that is an issue certainly for the membership. And insurance companies like at least one training a year. They prefer a lot more. So, one that is the required recurrent training is just table stakes. That means they'll underwrite you. Doesn't mean you'll get favorable treatment on the premium. If you have any questions, as I'm going quite rapidly through the materials, I have a lot of material to present. But if you have any questions, please type them in the chat there. How many hours do we train? Okay, we train about 5 hours, most of us, 5 hours per year. But if you think about it, that's essentially the recurrent training, right? I mean, the recurrent training is some coursework, online coursework, and maybe 4 or 5 hours of either in sim or in plane training. And so I view that essentially as one training event per year. And is this really adequate? Is that really good for you? Again, I'm not using this soapbox, but I personally do a lot more training events in addition to the annual recurrent, the mid-year training. PMOPA subsidizes the mid-year training. And question for you, for yourself, is how much training, how much of that subsidy do you avail of, the mid-year training subsidy? 262 of us have received training other than PA 46. And 242 of us have had PA 46 training. And I'm presuming that's in the last year for your recurrent training. Nothing much to say here on the type of training. I saw a lot of diversity in terms of training, which is quite healthy, ranging from training, upset recovery, high altitude, other types of training to support another rating. So there's clearly good diversification of training for those of us who are actually doing the training. Age of our planes is all over. I did not get the detail around the avionics in each of the airplanes. But if you notice, there are clusters around a 1980s type model airplane. In the 1990s, there's a cluster. There's another cluster here in the 2005 range. And then there was, several newer planes here that we're starting to see in this subnormal distribution here. And so the question that comes up, sorry, I don't have the answer, it's something you can answer yourself, is are the older planes just as well maintained as the newer planes? Because with the newer planes, several are within warranty, several are, are not too far past due time or condition items. But we just need to be thinking about, are some of the older planes as well maintained as newer planes? Not implying they're not, just posing a question for us to answer ourselves. It is important that we, based on my conversations with a few carriers, it is important that we point out the avionics that we have in our planes, because it is quite well known that the newer avionics, such as the 1000s, the NXIs, and the 3000s, make it a whole lot easier, give us more awareness, position awareness, and generally lead to a better safety. What I did not pick up was how many of the older airframes do have upgraded panels. I do know several of us upgrade panels. So it is highly probable that some of the older airframes have the newer upgraded avionics, and pointing out to the underwriters that we have the newer avionics could only help. I did a review of who the carriers are in the PA-46 space. There's not a whole lot. If I take a count here, that's what, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, maybe about 20 carriers in the space. And it's important to know that several variables affect the premium. And as an example, the variables that affect premiums are the insured value of the hull, the limits of liability, deductibles, policy exclusions. I'm going to talk more about it. Whether your plane is hangared versus tied down, the type of and the amount of training that you do. Pilot age matters to most, if not all, most, certainly not all carriers. More about that later. Pilot occupation and profile matter. Are you working in a fast food restaurant? How are you affording and are able to maintain a PA-46 versus whether you're an executive or a business owner with disposable income to take care of this expensive airframe? What your typical mission is, that's quite important to them. Whether you do a lot of international travel. So for example, if you're traveling a lot to the islands or to South America, carriers think of that as a higher cost to retrieve a broken down aircraft than if it were mostly domestic travel. So that's important. Where your home bases matters, total time and type matters more. Hours flown per year, the length of the relationship with the carrier. That jumped out as a big driver here. More about that later. So these are several variables that affect premium. They're used in their underwriting rules and their rating rules. and how they come up with the premium for you. It's important for you to ask if your broker is contracted in several markets. I'll give you a personal, for instance. Several years ago, when I bought my first aircraft, not a PA-46, I went to my broker who was, taking care of my properties, my business, everything. And as an accommodation, he wrote me a policy on the plane. But he was not contracted in a lot of the aviation markets. And so it's important that you pick a broker who is not working with you as an accommodation to help you, because you're providing him a lot of business on other fronts, such as your home, automobile, and business, or whatever else. But is it a primary business for your broker? I think you will get more competitive offerings from a broker who is admitted to several markets, as opposed to providing it as an accommodation. There are, of the insurance companies, now I know which of these insurance companies, the names of these insurance companies, but I chose to obfuscate that, not knowing the sensitivity of the carriers themselves, because we want them to engage with us in the different programs that we may choose to do. But the message, more important than the names of specific carriers, is the fact that there is one carrier who has over a third of the market share of the PA-46 fleet. Now, that's a positive and a negative in my mind. It's a positive, meaning the carrier is probably providing a good value in terms of premium. But the negative is there too much market share concentrated in one carrier? Is there a concentration risk? What happens if that carrier leaves our market? Is there pricing power? So all those things come to mind. But in general, it came across to me that if you exclude a few here, the major carriers have a reasonable population of the membership that they do insure, and therefore it's in their interest to stay in the market here. Long-term relationships matter. This was articulated to me loud and clear. Shorter the relationship, higher the premiums. About half of us seem to have long relationships. The other half seems to be moving around or is new, couldn't tell. And so longer the relationship, definitely lower the premium. More likely, as you age, they are not going to bump you. But here's the problem. About 25% of us have filed a claim. That's a large number compared to 4.9 or 5% in the automobile world that actually file a claim. Now you understand why our premiums are high. A whopping fourth of us have actually filed a claim, and a good 14% of us have reported that we've had an accident, meaning more have had a non-reportable incident. These were accidents. And so 14% of us have had accidents, and 25% of us have filed a claim. Again, this is based on the data that was reported. So here's the problem, and why we are where we are in terms of our insurance premiums. Here are some averages and the minimums and the maximum. Again, I want to point out that premium, while it may be presented as a factor on the hull rate, there are several other variables that go in calculating the premium. But I have, for example, a range average of 0.185 or 19 being the average hull rate, from a minimum of 0.005 to a maximum of 0.06. So that's the range of the hull rate. Limits of liability in our membership range from minimum of 30,000. There were several that were self-insured or uninsured. I did not count those in this data. So I discarded those for this calculation, but the minimum was $30,000. Average was 1.7 million, and the maximum limit of liability was $11 million. The hull value, there were several that were blank, so I don't know really what the minimum is. But the average of the ones that I looked at was about 1.2 million, with a maximum of 3.9 million, which explains, which makes sense given the M600 airframe. The average deductible, I have a lot more to talk about deductibles here in a bit, but the average deductible was $10,000. The minimum was actually a 0, and the maximum deductible was $100,000. And the premiums ranged from a low of $2,000. Remember, that could be a very low hull value. It could be very high deductible. It could be a very low limit of liability. So you can't really think about it as $2,000. But the average was about $20,000. And the max I mentioned in my opening was about $87,000. And when you do get a quote from your broker, have your broker share the list of carriers who they approached on your behalf and who gave the quotes, who quoted your business. So they may approach, 4 or 5 markets, and 2 or 3 or 4 may actually give you a quote. I don't know how many of you are asking for it. I do. So do ask for who did you approach and what were the quotes. Again, I do want to reiterate, average hull rate, yeah, that's an indicator, but by itself it's misleading since liability limits, deductibles, whole bunch of things have a bearing on the premium there. So coming to conclusions and recommendations, here are some conclusions I've come to. Hull value versus liability. Most claims are for hull damage. Bird strikes, lightning, hangar rash, runway excursion versus liability. Okay, most claims are for hull damage. Hull value does affect the insurance premium the most. However, high liability limits will start affecting premiums quite significantly. As you start getting over $1 million worth of liability limits, you can see your premiums start to exponentially go up. It is important that you assign the proper hull value. Very often we say, you know what, okay, my airframe's worth 1.2 million, or let's say 1 million. I'm going to just go ahead and buy $1.5 million worth of insurance. The problem there is, if it's not properly assigned, then a total loss is not declared on an underinsured hull, or a repair is made in the case of a true total loss for an overinsured hull. So if your hull is overinsured at 1.5 million, then in fact it's worth $1 million. They may force a repair as opposed to saying, you know what, it's a true total loss and write you a check for the $1 million. And the opposite is also true, that they may not declare a total loss. And you get my point on an underinsured hull, sorry. Here's something I saw a lot of, which is quite surprising. Some members had 1 million or 2 million limit of liability. Okay, makes sense. But they had limits of liability per passenger of $100,000 or $200,000. Now think about what that is. It's basically saying you have $100,000 or a $200,000 policy effectively, because they're not going to pay out any more than the limit of liability per passenger. So what you should consider is a smooth policy without sublimits per passenger. Then you're really getting the true benefit of a $1 or $2 million limit, regardless of the number of passengers or the injury per passenger. So something for you to consider. as opposed to having sublimits per passenger, consider a smooth policy. The next item is deductibles do not have a material impact on insurance premiums. They do as they start becoming large, but not if they're tiny. I was quite surprised to see several of us have deductibles of $100 or $1,000. Now play that back in your head. What value is a $1,000 deductible for an in-motion claim? If the plane is in motion and it suffers damage in the aviation world, the probability of it being anywhere close to $1,000 is close to zero. No in-motion claim is likely to be this low. So think about why you're getting that type of a deductible. That's as good as a zero deductible. Increasing deductibles marginally, so going from $1,000 deductible to a $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 deductible does not have a significant impact on insurance premiums. Now, if you start increasing your deductibles to $25,000 or $50,000 or $100,000, then it can drop your premium by $5,000 or so, about a third. But it still is not going to reduce it as much as you would expect, because the carrier has to retain a large portion of the premium in a pool to handle a total loss. So the net message is you can get a discount, 5,000 or so, if you have very high deductibles, but deductibles don't move the needle a lot since they have to have premiums to factor in total losses. And so in closing on this point, consider policies with either no deductible or with very high deductibles. So as an example, there was an individual with a 3.2 million hull value at a $25,000 deductible, which did make some difference. And he got a $30,000 premium at a pretty attractive rate here. So that's because the deductible was a large number here. The next thing is, while a policy may appear relatively inexpensive, take time to understand the exclusions and the carve-outs in the policy. One carrier routinely excludes FOD, foreign object damage. And that can reduce their premiums quite significantly. But with the reverse and the betas that we have on our turbines, there is a reasonable chance of getting a foreign object damage. And that damage may not manifest itself immediately. It may start manifesting as a degradation over time, and you're not going to be covered if there is a foreign object FOD exclusion in your policy. Look at the claims payment experience of a carrier beyond just your risk profile, beyond your underwritten risk. There is a reason why one policy is less expensive than the other. So I urge you to go and check the policy there. Pleasantly, I found that some carriers have the policy of grandfathering you as you age. And so they don't have the proverbial 70 and your cut policy there. And so they'll stay with you as long as you maintain your medical and will fly. There may be an uptick in premium, but it's not as much age-driven premium as it is driven by cost of repair and other litigation costs, etc. So think about that. Think about the fact that relationships matter. And many terminate policies at around 70 years of age. So something for you guys to consider as we all age here. Longer the relationship, lower the rate, period. No ifs, ands, or buts there. Can't put a harder point on it. There are a couple of new entrants entering the market. You should do your diligence. Is their premium so attractive because they're trying to buy the business into the market? And, some carriers may be the first ones to exit, clearly not implying that any of the current newcomers fall into this category. I'm just pointing out to you that there are some carriers who've been in this space with us for a long time. There are some who've come in and gone out. Just be aware of that as you go with the carrier. I've talked about hangar planes versus tie downs. Again, quite obvious, right? If it's just a tie down, you're likely higher exposure to lightning, thunderstorms, hails, and tornadoes. Pilot qualifications, ratings, how often you fly have a big impact on the premium. There is, however, such a thing as flying too much for an owner pilot, surprisingly. For example, if an owner pilot is flying 500 hours, it's likely to raise questions around illegal charter. Classically, a owner pilot isn't going to be able to fly 500 hours a year. Who owns the plane is important. This was voiced to me by a carrier. By not sharing who is behind the LLC, the carrier wonders who are they really underwriting. So be thoughtful about that aspect. I talked about where you fly has a bearing. If you fly to South America a lot, cost of retrieval is higher. Consider if it's worth filing a claim or not. Just because we have a policy, if you have minor damage, think about, is it worth paying for it out of your pocket as if it were a deductible and not filing, so you don't get hit with premium recovery in future years, or if you do want to file. And one thing I was told by carriers was insurance premiums are rising due to the risk profile and inflation. They said, the cost of repair is high, the inflation and social cost. Social cost is, litigation and all the other noise that they get as a result of an accident. Training, single biggest factor that the underwriters use to determine premiums. So here are my recommendations to PMOPA. Hopefully not all of them are controversial, but you asked me to analyze this, and here it is. I think we as a membership and as a owners group need to think about programs that need to be developed for the aging membership. It was very evident to me how we're aging here. We need a program or a few classes to educate the membership on key clauses in their policies. I pointed out, why is there $1,000 deductible for in motion and $100 deductible for not in motion? I don't understand that. This whole thing about being non-instrument rated. I think PMOPA needs to requirement is too harsh a word, encourage strongly all of us having an instrument rating. Encourage the use of flight data monitoring for our personal use, and review the data after every flight. Potentially reward training with gamification. Set up competition amongst the membership, and all these gamification aspects seem to drive behavior. You win something. Who did a training event in September, or something like gamify. It's just an idea. There's a lot of ways to look at it. Convene an insurance panel with insurance companies at the upcoming PMOPA conference. And I like PMOPA to think of training as having 3 parts here. We keep talking about training, but we don't dissect it into what is really training. So think of training as, number 1, insurance required initial or recurrent training. Clearly, mandatory has to be done. Number 2 is supplementary in-plane training by the membership to build your own personal proficiency and safety. And the third one is out-of-plane training with coursework or other standardized means. Training matters regardless of exactly what type of training it is. One recommendation to PMOPA is to develop and drive adoption of standardized training curriculum, as opposed to a focus on certified or approved training instructors. I think the curriculum is more important, not implying that certification and approval of training instructors is not, but that is probably going to drive more benefit to the membership immediately, because it'll broaden the pool of instructors available for certainly these two categories of training pieces. Because insurance companies do have their own pool of approved trainers or instructors. But if PMOPA takes the leadership in the standardized training curriculum, the advocacy will bear fruit and bring more qualified instructors into the pool. And I think we need to understand, why is the frequency of our training so low? Is it because of the cost of training? Is it because training and trainers are concentrated in certain geographies and not broadly available all across the country? I don't know the answer. I think we need to answer that and fix that. Another couple of ideas: offer a free 1-year membership to PMOPA, to all PA 46 owners who are non-members. Remember, this survey was only of PMOPA members. There are several who are not members and whose risk affects our premiums. And to the extent we can influence the safety of these non-members, we will benefit. And so giving away 1 year of membership and bringing these non-owners into our fold is likely to benefit us, in my view. And perhaps offer a 1-year free membership with all new sales, thereby driving safety training awareness. And the last part is, we do have the Master Aviator program. It does cover a lot of the aspects of training there. I think PMOPA should drive more promotion and more advocacy around that, and all of us collectively should work to achieve the Master Aviator designation. So we're about close to 7:45. That leaves about 15 minutes for questions. This is all I have in terms of prepared material. Happy to answer questions to the extent I know the answer.
Salil, that's excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you to leave this last slide up, because if there's time at the end, I do want to touch on a couple of things with respect to your recommendations. So the first question that came in is, and actually a couple of people asked this, is will the slides be available to members to view afterwards? And I think the answer to that is yes. Obviously, we're recording this webinar, so the webinar recording will be available. The slides are out there. I think we'd be very happy to share these with members. Salil, I know you made some changes from the draft you sent me last week, so if you don't mind sending me a PDF with the current version that you just presented, I'll post it on the past events page on the PMOPA website when we have the video recording as well. And we'll let members know that that's available, so you'll be able to download that. Second question that came in, and not sure that you'll have the answer to this off the top of your head, but maybe we can do some more analysis and get back to the person who asked, is with respect to the non-instrument rated pilots, were they mostly or all piston pilots? Did you do a correlation between who answered the question as not having instrument rating and what type of PA 46 they flew?
I think that information is probably in the data. I'm not 100%. It probably is in the data, because I know the airframe. So yeah, the answer is it is in the data. I just didn't do it.
Okay, but that's something we can get.
Yeah, we could think about that if it's driving a certain behavior for us.
Yeah, great. Next question, I think, is a really good one from an education perspective. And you touched upon this with respect to the number of underwriters that are out there, and that your personal practice is to ask to see the bids that came in from the broker, what they were able to get from the underwriters. This person's asking, how can we tell if our broker is shopping our application to all eligible carriers? And I think ask him.
Ask him. Absolutely. It's your right And your prerogative as you come up to renewal. Remember, you should be thinking of a renewal a solid 3 months in advance.
Mhm.
So my renewal comes up in June. I start my conversation sometime in the March timeframe, because in the March timeframe, I've lined up my recurrent sometime in the April so timeframe. I have a conversation with them on what the market is doing, who do they think they want to go after, uh, and so this is think of this as a 3 month process for you, and ask them.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think there's also an opportunity for a lot of folks in the PA46 community to be very proactive in how they present what they're doing and why they're a good risk and why they should be considered carefully by the underwriters. It's not just about filling out the form quickly with, kind of a guess as to how many hours, et cetera, but providing as much detail as possible. And there are several folks in PMOPA membership who have reached out to me. They've prepared resumes, summary of their engagement with the community, what they've done from a training perspective, how they've gone above and beyond, and they've been able to get insurance into their 70s. And other PA46 pilots have had different experiences. And when I've asked some of them, their answer is they just quickly filled out the form or didn't even fill out the form that the broker sent them. So the underwriter doesn't have much to go on.
Yeah, from a very personal perspective, I have a personal statement in there, and it's a 2-page personal statement where I list out everything I've done, what I do. I explain to them my missions. I take time to explain the different missions I took, the learning I had from the missions. The more you educate your underwriter, the better he knows you, the better he will underwrite you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Next question is this member, it's the first time they heard about the mid-year training subsidy, and they weren't aware of that, and they'd love to hear more about that. So just briefly, the PMOPA Safety and Education Foundation grants members $400 for one time a year for specific types of training that you do that's above and beyond your normal recurrent training or an initial rating, that sort of thing. So if you go to a class like M class or John Mariani's class, or if you were to do a tailwheel rating, or if you wanted to do something that's above and beyond, not your standard type of training, then you need to just simply submit a form that is at mmopasafety.org. Submit that form, that comes into me, and then I will work to get you a reimbursement check for $400. It's the form and some documentation of your training. We'll actually include that in a future issue of the PMOPA magazine, so it's easy for people to find where that's at. And I think last year we wrote 3 checks, so not many people have taken advantage of that opportunity. Next question is, what are your plans to communicate the results of this survey to the insurers? And is there a chance of feedback from them? One of our goals this year for PMOPA that I'm working with the board on is to have active or proactive outreach to the top PA46 insurance underwriters. Thanks to everybody participating in the survey and for Salil's data analysis, we know who the top 10 insurance underwriters are, and our goal is to engage proactively with at least 5 of them. And we will be sharing with them the survey, probably not the entire survey. We're also going to be sharing with them the work that we're doing on the standardized training program, the flight data monitoring program, and also the Master Aviator program and the benefits of those programs. And we also have some on our roadmap, some additional safety items that we'd like their feedback on, such as safety management systems scaled to owner-flown operations. So we think it'll be a very productive dialogue. There was an underwriter from one of the key companies, USAIG, who on his own attended our convention last year, participated in the CFI meeting, was really impressed with the work that we were doing in this safety arena and the quality of the CFIs who this individual engaged with on site at the convention, and also the quality of the PA46 owners and their commitment to safety. So that type of personal relationship and connection is really valuable, not just from a customer perspective, but overall from a community perspective, and we're going to take that seriously. Second part of this question is, have you, Salil, or have you done or are you planning to run statistical regressions of some measure of premium level and the various explanatory variables?
Guys, I can make a full-time job out of this.
We appreciate our volunteers, Salil.
Uh, so I was not planning on doing it. I think the way I'd like to leave it is, look, we have enough to start on. If there is other specific, let me put it this way, if there's other specific analysis that we think is going to help us better understand and manage our premiums, then I'd be very happy to do it. What I don't want to do is just sit down and just do more analysis for the sake of analysis. So I'm very committed to doing any and all analysis required. Once we take this, we think about it, and we understand what other analysis we need to do to help our membership better manage premiums. Is that a reasonable response to the question there, whoever asked the question?
I think it is, but they can certainly type in the chat or in the Q&A if they'd like to push back, and maybe we can have a discussion offline as well, if that would be helpful. The next question, and Salil, I know you have some reservations about answering this one, so we'll see what your thoughts are. But they say, okay, so who is the 800-pound gorilla underwriter? That one that has a third of the market share?
Yeah. So the reason I have the reservation is, from my perspective, we need the collaboration of the entire carrier community to help us, because we're not going to go to only one player. And publicizing who that one carrier is, I think, potentially upsets that market without giving us any benefit. And that's the reason why I obfuscated the names there.
Thanks. Next question is, what types of training, in addition to the annual recurrent training, would be recognized by the insurance carriers? I.e., do we report that we get IPCs every 6 months?
Yeah, so absolutely yes. Unequivocally yes. So reporting you get an IPC every 6 months, or you get it even when you are already current with the approaches and the holds, and you don't really need an IPC, and yet you're getting an IPC. That helps. Getting a BFR every year, though it's not required, and you're required to do it every 2 years, getting a BFR every year helps. Believe it or not, going in, how many of you have gone in and taken a IFR ground school all over again since you've had your IFR rating? That would count. Just sitting in on a weekend IFR ground school at your nearby training facility, that would count. Even simple things like going up with your trainer and practicing missed approaches, that helps. What they're looking for with the types of training you list is that you have a training mentality. As opposed to the specific training, they want to see that this individual has a training mentality and a safety mentality. And that can be demonstrated with even simple things like, reviewed Scott Denstead's SKU Log Pro materials. There's no sign off for that, but it just shows that you're doing a lot more than the mandatory 1 per year training.
I think that's exactly right. Next question is, was there any consideration for more than one pilot / owner flying the aircraft? 2 pilots, twice the risk, etc.
It didn't come out in the data for me, primarily because I wasn't looking for that. But there was a comment made to me by a carrier that if there are a couple of pilots, then we have to take a pause and look at, are we underwriting one more than the other? What experience are we really underwriting? So the short answer is, two pilots does affect the premium. I cannot answer for you how it affects it.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure you'll be able to answer this one. This might be something that their broker could could provide some insight on, but perhaps you want to take a stab on it based on the data that you've reviewed. This individual has a 1999 PA-46 with a value of about $450,000. Their premium is about $10,000 a year, and they want your opinion as to whether that's a reasonable amount.
Look, if you call me and based on the data I have, if you identify who you are in the data, if you want to do that, I can look at the data and tell you, hey, look, based on this, you may want to consider this range or something. I might be able to do that. I can't this very minute off the cuff tell you that.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Next question is there any insurance benefit for a pilot who's doing angel flight, other types of charitable flying?
Yeah, didn't come out in the data, and it's a question that was on my list. I didn't get around to asking that to the carriers, but it is a very valid question.
It's also great for proficiency. If you're engaging in that type of flying, you're flying more and therefore more hours, more proficiency.
Yeah, very true. Then again, the flip side of it is, I think, well, okay, now you're filling more seats, so now do you have higher liability there in the event of an accident? So I don't know. I just don't know the answer, and I didn't get around to asking them about it.
Great. That's something we can dig further when we meet with the insurance underwriters.
But that's a good question.
It is. Yeah. All these are good questions. So this question, does an IPC help from an insurance perspective if it's done with somebody who is not a PA-46 insurance approved CFII?
I didn't specifically ask that question worded that way, whether they view it differently or not. Based on the way the answer was given, my guess is it does not matter, because an IPC is an IPC. And I would go out on a limb and say that it would help you to do an IPC, whether or not it is with a PA-46 instructor.
Thanks. And a couple of the comments left. One is somebody said that they believe that underwriters like it when they're presented with a structured training program, where there's an annual training, recurrent, if you will, or if it's somebody with a new aircraft initial, followed with 6-month IPC in aircraft and other dual time, and they're using standard operating procedures. And having a training plan, what the expectation is for the training to be done in the next year versus ad hoc. So, oh, the weather's nice, I'm going to go train today, some CFI is available, kind of thing. So I think that's a good observation. And then the final one is one of our safety committee members wrote, excellent presentation, Salil. Thank you very much. I would like to encourage everyone to participate in the Master Aviator program. I went through it about 5 years ago, and it was the best thing I did after purchasing a PA-46. And I think that's exactly right. And we actually had a safety committee call today and spent a little bit of time talking about the Master Aviator program. The application is open for 2024. So it's on the PMOPA.com website under safety, Master Aviator. Super simple to apply for it. Just need to populate a couple fields with respect to your proficiency, how many hours you've flown, training you've done, et cetera. But a really easy application process. So do encourage everybody to apply for that. And then an incentive for why you might want to apply for that is, while we were on the safety committee call today, another member texted me. I'd actually the other day sent him his PDF copy of his certificate for the Master Aviator, which he turned in with his application to his insurance underwriter through his broker. And the underwriter came back and said, really glad to see you're participating in the Master Aviator program. We're actually going to reduce your premium by 6%. Insurance companies aren't in the business of giving discounts. So that was really great to see. That's how they valued the Master Aviator program. So certainly would echo that encouragement. I'm just going to take a moment, Salil, with some of your recommendations. Love to talk with the group later about what programs we could develop for aging membership. I agree that that's a real issue. I think what we're doing with flight data monitoring certainly can be helpful in that arena. And we are developing a standardized training program as well as a program to recognize instructors. The current issue of the PMOPA magazine, which should be hitting your mailboxes very soon, has an article that introduces what those standardized training programs are, and we will have them rolled out at the convention this year. With regard to insurance panel, thank you, Salil. You are going to be moderating an insurance panel at the convention. That's on the agenda, and the convention agenda will be posted in the next couple of weeks. We're planning to open registration on or around the 1st of June. The free membership to PMOPA, I can certainly talk with the board about giving an offer to everybody who's not a member. However, we already do have programs for free membership. If you buy a new PA46 through all the Piper dealers, they have a certificate that they can submit with free year of membership. And we also have any PA46 insurance approved CFI who's a member of PMOPA is able to give a free membership to somebody who is new to the PMOPA community. They can't have been a member in the previous several years, and they can get that after doing an initial or recurrent training with the CFI. And we have a good number of CFIs who actively engage with that program. So there are ways for people to get to know us through our community. So with that, I have 8:01. I went a minute over, but I thought those were important points to touch on. Salil, your volunteer work has been incredibly valuable. Appreciate the time that you took to go through this. I know you put a lot of hours into it. Appreciate all the members who completed the survey, incredibly high response rate, and look forward to continuing this conversation as we do continued work in this insurance arena for our members. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night.